Welcome, everyone, to the Black Women's Wellness Podcast. We are excited to have you listening and watching wherever you're streaming this. I'm Deja Love here with a wonderful episode of the Black Women's Wellness Podcast. And this is a podcast where we amplify Black women's voices as we discuss how we manage stress and we maintain our well-being. For this podcast, we really want to ensure that all Black women live productive and meaningful lives that are unhinged by stress. And so we are excited that you joined us, and we hope that you enjoy this episode. Today, I'm joined by a wonderful guest, a friend that I've known for a while, Roselane. Today's episode, we're really going to talk about Black women birthing, and we want to be inclusive, Black birthing persons here, about natural birth and the experience and how to make it not as intimidating and scary. And so Roselane here has birthed her 3 beautiful children naturally. I mean, I always say she's a superwoman, and we're excited to just hear about your experience. So before we get in, Roselane, if you wanted to introduce yourself to our listeners or say anything, feel free.
Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Roselane, and I'm excited to be on this podcast with Deja and to talk about birthing and my birthing experience, my natural birthing experience. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. We're happy you're here. So kicking it off, tell us and we'll get into more about this, but with raising 3 children, how do you maintain your well-being and wellness?
That's a great question. When I saw that, I kind of chuckled because I feel like that's a struggle for me. But I started thinking about ways that I've been trying to balance things out with 3 children and doing it partially as a single and then as a single mother, and then but also partially as a co-parenting mother too. I take naps when my youngest, who just turned 1 on the 1st. I've learned when she goes down, I will go down because it's a challenge. When it's like, oh, I now have a time to do something, but my body's like, we're tired. Let's go ahead and, rest. So naps are a big piece. I've been learning to say no and being okay with my no's. My 11-year-old is a social person, kind of like me sometimes, and she wants to do things. She's in middle school, so there's a lot of times where she asks me to do stuff, and I have to remind her that it's not just her, it's all of us and how it impacts the whole family. So I can't say yes to all the things or run her around the city all the time. So being okay with saying no and understanding that that's part of my parenting, it doesn't make me a bad mom, that I can't do everything, because if I don't rest or, balance the stress, then I can't show up to be the best version of myself as a parent, as a mother, as a sister, as a friend. So I'm really learning to be okay with setting boundaries, really. And then I tried to, I was trying to do a lot of overtime, but really learning to not having, at least having my Sundays off and understanding there's why, because my faith is a big piece for me, and why, we're called to have the Sabbath and that rest, and understanding that in rest and, there was a verse that I read which had to do with, in rest you find strength, which, really after I did something like that, I did feel more like I had strength and energy. So it's even a spiritual thing that I must do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I appreciate that hearing. How do you mention the importance for you in setting boundaries and saying no? How do you do that? Because like you said, you're also a social person, and, there's always events. How do you say no? I think it's hard for a lot of us, and I'm sure our listeners would love to hear, like, what helps you to just firmly say no.
Well, I think it's easier now because I do have children. I think before, when I first moved to DC, and even on my days off, I would be going to a really cool event. And even though I enjoyed it, that took energy. But having children actually has made it so I kind of like, well, I have to pack up everybody and we all have to go. So it becomes kind of what's realistic. And what's been special too is my children, they've, teaching them about pausing and resting, because I used to have them in activities on Saturdays, but now they really enjoy having like lazy Saturdays where really, if we're even going to get out of the house, it's not till like after 3:30. And so they even are not as willing to give up one day where we're not getting up to go to school. Right. So that's helped too, where even I wanted to take my kids to the pumpkin patch, and I would only be able to give them an hour. And my daughter was like, Mom, it's not even worth, packing us all up and going for an hour. Like, so there's some help, and even in their wisdom, to be like, it's okay. You don't have to push yourself to give us this experience. It's okay. Like, we want to start things slow, and it's okay if we just go to the park.
Right.
So that helps to make it a family thing, and teaching them, which then helps me. It reminds me of what I'm trying to teach them, that not everything is a go, go, go.
That's beautiful. And so for us to take it a step back, we talked about your 3 children briefly. For our listeners, what inspired you to intentionally, have your 3 children naturally? And this was, I think about, your daughter. This was before the boom and popularity of doulas and birth centers. This was at a time where it was very standard, you go to the hospital, you have a birth. But what went into you of just really challenging that and saying, I'm going to have my daughter naturally, and then, your other children as well?
Right. So this was in 2011 when, Zaila, my oldest, was born. So about in 2010, I've only been in DC for about a year. And my partner at that time, he was, was like very natural, like vegetarian, really about that way of living. But at that time, I was going to a gynecologist who I really liked. And in their practice, he wasn't practicing, delivery. So we were told, we could go to someone else. And that experience with this other doctor that wasn't very positive kind of made we were having discussions about, maybe doing natural. We were doing research. I think we knew some people in the community that had talked about the birth center, but we liked our gynecologist, Dr. Saffron. But after that negative experience that we had with another doctor, it pushed us to even be like, you know what, let's go this route. So that's kind of really what started it, was kind of like, oh, this isn't it. Like, we don't want to have this experience.
Oh, wow.
And I guess I can say with the experience, when we went to this doctor to get checked, he didn't even like greet us, acknowledge us, anything. We walked in and he just started like doing the checkup, no acknowledgement of us as a people.
Right.
Whereas Dr. Saffron was very different. He was very warm. And so it was kind of like, oh, this is new to me and my partner, and we're not even being seen.
Oh, wow.
So said no.
And so that was the same doctor that you had your other children? Did you have the same?
Well, no. So that doctor was, no. So this wasn't, I had my gynecologist, Dr. Saffron, and in his practice, there were other doctors. And so he had recommended another doctor in that practice. And so that was negative, which then moved us to the birth center.
Okay.
And that's where the relationship with the birth center started. And I had all my 3 children with the birth center.
Oh,
or
wow.
The Community of Hope now they're called, but at that time it was the birth center. Yes.
Wow. And for you, with having your children at the birth center, did you have support? Did you use a doula and other support for you?
Well, it's funny when people ask me, because I always say that the children's father, Dwayne, he was essentially the doula because he was very involved.
Okay.
At that time, the birth center, the beautiful thing at that time, we had classes, so you got to meet other um, moms that were pregnant in the same group.
Mm-hmm.
We had they even did like a daddy boot camp for the fathers. It was
Oh,
very hands-on. They would offer yoga there. It was really communal.
okay.
But with their father, he was in it. He's like, I'm going to be present and taking all the information in. And we, outside of the birth center, we also ended up taking private classes or like birthing classes with she was a midwife doula.
Mm.
And she ended up she would come like on Sundays, I think, and for a few hours we would have more of a 101 with
Okay.
her.
Oh,
With
wow.
my first, with with the first, we did that.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Oh,
But he
wow.
he he was the doula because we did everything. Like my mom said, she never seen something like that, like
Mm-hmm.
where you had the father be so present and
Mm-hmm.
involved that we had a whole rhythm that
Mm.
we had practiced with the other midwife that was teaching us.
Okay.
So yeah, that we built those skills and that knowledge with her.
Okay. That's
Hmm.
wonderful. And so your partner, it sounds like that was just innately, he was just very involved that, and
Yes.
so how do you think other partners can be as involved? Because it sounds like there was the formal class after, but he just seemed like from the onset, he was very hands-on.
Right. Yeah, he comes from like a teaching background, right? He's a teacher or was a
Okay.
teacher. So he was, had his notes. And the beautiful thing about having this Shaneri, she was the teacher that taught us. She made it so she was like, okay, let's practice as if she was giving birth. And so he had
Okay.
his whole little setup. And so when that time came for me to have Zaila,
Mm.
he knew how to, because she timed them. She's like,
Oh,
okay, let's say she's in birth, and what do you do? And
okay.
so, um, but yeah, I think to encourage other partners, it's really understanding like that you're in this together, and it's really
Mm.
supporting the mother as she's pregnant, and like how can you really help.
Hmm.
And I think when someone is really new, it's okay to like get more classes taken if you can, or more information, or watching things, and then asking other people like their experiences. And then it's like and it's okay too if they're not, they understand what they can handle, and then inviting in a doula, because that is the beauty now, that is more, that there you have that kind of support.
Right. Oh,
Hmm.
wow. And your experience, I think, and especially in the natural birthing movement, is the shift of language and how we describe the experience. So it's moving away from a lot of the negative connotation of language, like contractions and pain, and it's, sensation and waves. What was your experience? Just really the physical birth process, because I think many want to go a natural route for Black birthing persons, but it seems really unattainable, or, it sounds like how you initially had the experience kind of directed in a specific medical intervention approach. So how was it for you just in the natural, if you could give our listeners an experience of what was that like, as you're feeling sensation, and it sounds like at a birth center, maybe you're not pressured to try to have an intervention or medication, but tell
Hmm.
us what was that experience?
um well, yeah, with the birth center, what's powerful too is like, even as we're writing out our birth plan, they teach us that, you have what's ideal, and then also that many things can happen. But I know for us, like we wanted to do the Bradley method, which has to do with breathing. And
Okay.
so, we had a whole method of movement. Um, and I think what's nice too about the birth center is that, it's, you're not on this time thing, right? Like the birthing
Mm-hmm.
process, it's going to take what it's going to take. And when everybody, because everybody's on the same page. That's something that we had to be all in agreement with, is that we're all on the same page. And that was important, who you're going to allow in the room, to make sure, because even with my daughter in 2011, I had to let my mom know that, hey, we want to do it natural. So you guys can't be in there suggesting something different,
right, right.
which wasn't an issue. But, and then so my daughter was at the birth center, but my son, it was still the birth center, but actually in the hospital, which was different. And so that was a different experience, because there, you had the medical, where they monitor stuff. It felt more restrictive, even though it was still a natural birth, and it was with the birth center. And my midwife was there. It just was different from what I had with my first. And then with my third, I had it at the birth center again. Because at that time, when I had my son in 2014, the birth center wasn't, they were closed. So they were just, they're connected to the Washington hospital, because some people want, they're not quite ready, or they don't feel like, they're unsure. So the option, you can give birth at the hospital, but you're still with like the midwife. And then there's some medical things that are going to get looked at. And if, certain things aren't met, then it's going to be suggested that you give birth at the hospital with them still. Supporting you and stuff, which is nice, because you do have advocacy there. It's not like you're on your own with the doctors at the hospital. So that's nice to know. But the sensations, it was really the breathing. I did a water birth with my daughter. And then even with my third, it was supposed to be a water birth, but she came a lot faster. And the difference with my third is that I was in a different relationship, and it was just me. So I, in regards to the doula, I was told that John Hopkins has a birthing companion program for the nursing students, and it's a free program, because as much as I, would love to have a doula, financially I couldn't afford it. So it was recommended, because the birth center also offered, had some doulas, but it wasn't guaranteed. So what was really different with this third birth that I had with Esperanza is that even though I didn't get to physically meet the doulas, the birth companions, I met them through the Zoom. And even when I was in the middle of giving birth to Esperanza, I was like, okay, I know this is my third time, but I really was very casual this time, and really didn't do as much to, think it through. So I was able to Zoom with Daria, and she walked me through it and gave me some recommendations as I was walking back and forth trying to remember, okay, so each birthing, each birth was different in that way. That way.
Oh, wow. And what kept you at peace and really grounded during that time? Especially you mentioned your third, you were independent. What kept you, during that space where our thoughts, you could easily, I would imagine, get so overwhelmed. How did you stay so centered and connected?
Yes. Well, like I mentioned in the beginning, faith is a big piece of who I am. And that's really rooted, on God. And so I had discovered a book called A Supernatural Childbirth, which is the concept of, like praying your way through the birth and really giving it to God. And so even though with my other two, yes, I'm a woman of faith, and yes, I prayed, but this was I was intentional. It was a different intentionality, that even when I prayed about how I wanted the birth process, like asking, okay, I only want the labor to go this long. I don't even want to know that I'm in labor. There were certain things that I specifically asked for and prayed over. And then even in moments where I'd have doubt, or, when there are tests or anything, even every time maybe a negative thought would come or uncertainty, I would have to remind myself, or, maybe have a verse, or, having the support of prayers, because they have a podcast and they have a Facebook group, and they would meet once a month, where whether somebody was trying to conceive, or somebody maybe just had the baby, or they were pregnant, you could request and just pray and listen to other people. So with Esperanza, this third birth, it was really, really a spiritual birth because I didn't have the partnership support, but it was really about that. And it was about community. It was about all the other, whether from the birth center to the chiropractor, because in this birth, I had to actually go to the chiropractor. I'd never done that before.
Okay.
And actually it's more common. I didn't know that it was actually so common that, they service a lot of, pregnant women just because of the way your body shifts, obviously. So from day one, but going to a Black women chiropractor, Dr. Cohen, Dr. Britt, and Dr. Darren, they just were very loving from day one. So, and I would have to go like 3 times a week, and then it would 2 times, and then, it was reduced, and then when it was closer. So it's just who you're surrounded by. And then the birth center too, the staff, and having other midwives that look like me, and that, because I had just turned, Esperanza was born in November, and I turned 40 in September. Wow. So, I'm, older. And say, just the terminology. I'm just like, it's definitely a male terminology. But I was a little concerned when I called them and let them know. But they told me, the birth center, that, they've seen a lot of women in the advanced age that were birthing, and, it was fine. So, they really gave me the freedom to make some choices on my own based just on my health.
Okay.
Because at my advanced age with Esperanza, they wanted me to go to the Washington Hospital Center to get monitored, because I guess when you're an older advanced age, they want to monitor it more.
Okay.
And I was like, this is too stressful. I have to get in the car, sit in traffic, to have you sit here and listen to my baby. You're actually causing me more stress.
Right.
And so, they said, look, you've been healthy. You're not required to go as many times as they want. I went a few times, and then I said, I'm going to trust in faith, and I'm not going to keep putting myself through that stressful drive just so, because of my age, you want to look at some numbers, and that's for each of their own. Like, it's fine. And that was, the nurse was really kind, and it was great, but I was like, I don't want to do this. So it's nice to be able to have people that support or are willing to work with you and how you might feel, or to be honest, if it's, an option, depending on how the birthing the birthing process is going, in the sense of, or the labor.
Yes. Oh, wow. I love hearing that. That's so, it just sounds like you trusted yourself, you trusted your intuition, and certainly, as you mentioned, the spiritual component. I really, that resonates, because I think in healthcare, it's, we're taught, you trust the doctor, trust the nurse. And it sounds like your experience, especially with Esperanza, your third child, that it was so intuitive, that you really centered it in connecting with spirit and really affirming and praying over it. And I think that's such a paradigm shift, and it's so beautiful to hear. And I just wonder, what would you recommend to those birthing persons who are either pre-conception, they're thinking about it, and it just sounds so overwhelming because it's through a medical industrial lens, that it's just, what you articulated, it just sounds so amazing. And it's just the nerves, at least, I think about, for me, I want to have children someday, and how you just explain your experience. It sounds so calming and just so peaceful, not at all to negate that I'm sure there was a lot, but it definitely just sounds very just grounded compared to what I would imagine in a hospital, where it's the opposite of that. How do you think people who are just even considering this, how can they attain what you had with Esperanza? I mean, I feel like that's the ideal. Most people want to have a peaceful, grounded, connected, centered experience, but sometimes don't have that outcome.
Right. I mean, I do want to say that, there were moments of doubt and fear and, things did show up. I did have some things to work through. So definitely, I don't want anybody to think that, those things weren't there. But I guess having the previous two births and then my faith being such a key component, that was key. But I think, it's the people that you surround yourself with. However, the higher power or whatever centers someone, I would, suggest that very thing that centers them to make sure that they hold on to that and really connected to that. I would say, do your research. Because there is a lot of information and it is overwhelming. And even though she was my third, I still would have my doubts. And even, part of me, when they were really willing to let me just make my own decisions, it wasn't always, part of me was like, you're not going to tell me? Like, I kind of wanted someone to say, no, Roselane, you need to do this, when they're like, oh, it's up to you. And it's like, wait, but I don't know, So it was something that I had to learn to trust, because the previous two childbirths, my partner, I would look to him in many ways because, we were 8 years apart and he just had this, confidence and maybe experience working with children that, I was very, like didn't feel the experience. Definitely, was an 8 year ahead of my plans that I had. So I definitely didn't feel like I had, the knowledge that I had with, Esperanza in that sense. But yeah, I would say, what's the thing that centers someone to trust, to surround yourself with people that have the same goals or speaking positively. Understand that, people will say things because what's amazing to me is our body physically changing becomes this public eye thing. And, I struggle through, where people would say things to me. And I really had to learn to just breathe through it. Remember, it's not personal. And some days are better than others. But it is an amazing thing that, no matter where I'd walk, somebody's going to speak to me, to the point that the day I gave birth, I didn't even want to go inside the store because I'm like, I don't want to hear about how I'm going to pop, or like how people don't really think about wording. And how I wouldn't want to birth in the middle of a store. Like, why would you say that to someone? Or I hope you pop. So it's just funny. Just, a lot of things are coming, but really just remembering like, okay, I don't have to take it personally. Let me breathe through, or I might be short. I might say something and it's okay too, because it's like, let me just be, please.
Right.
And I would say, move, like go out and walk. I think in the West, this idea that, oh, you're pregnant, so you can't, you can't go do things, or you shouldn't do things. But it's like, no, it's healthy to, if you're a runner, or if you were playing a sport before, like you don't have to fully stop. I think it's just really understanding yourself and having the support, and understand that, birthing's been going on, since the beginning of time. And that, all the people that in the world here, somebody carried them,
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if the recommendations, see, I'm trying to see what I wrote, because I did try to write. Yeah, I said faith, family, talking to other people that maybe have had experiences, only having like trying to find positive people in your circle. And for me too, I whether it's an online community, there's like birthing groups, whether you're at a birth center or you just have a private doctor, seeing what resources are out there. That's really important, because I do believe in community and like having others around.
Right.
If it's feasible. I know depending where people are, it's different.
Yeah. The community. That's a really good point. And as you were saying, Roselane, about not internalizing, and it's a point that I don't think people really think about as you're growing, as the baby's expanding. We don't think about the reaction, the external of what people are going to say and how that can affect, and especially as you're pregnant and the hormones and the emotions. I mean, that's it. Just
Yes.
I'm thinking about that. I've never really even thought of that in a way, and you're right, because it's so ubiquitous. People will just, oh, look at your belly, or just say things. And we don't
Mhm.
think about how the receiver is going to take that.
Right. Or the expectation of the receiver to just be like, oh, okay. And
Mm-hmm.
what was different with Esperanza and having my 10-year-old, she was 10-year-old at that time,
Okay.
because now she's experiencing some of the things that I would experience. So she would hear people say something. So, one of the women in the apartment complex, I would tell people, ask me my due date, and I would tell them, and they're like, oh, you're not going to make it. And
Oh,
it's like,
wow.
but like, I don't know, and it's like, okay, I know she doesn't mean it in
Mm-hmm.
a bad way, but it's like, people don't really think about what they're saying, because it's
Right.
like, all I'm praying for is I want to make it to my,
Exactly.
and that's my prayer. So for someone to tell me, and and I told her, I said, no, I will,
Mm-hmm.
or we were at the mall and some lady, was like, oh, you look like this or something. And, so it's funny talking to it
Mm-hmm.
from a 10-year-old point of view and seeing like, oh, wow, mommy, like the world is reacting to your body and putting their assumptions on you. And,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would just, smile. Sometimes I just have a look. And then sometimes I just have to laugh, but you're right. And these hormones too, because, I remember I was trying to park and this guy, he like did something. And I remember I got so mad. And then I was like to remind myself, like, oh, you're pregnant. You can't just get out of your car and go tell them. But I was ready. Like, or I think with Zaila, when I was living at a studio, I would bike all the time with her. And I remember, I was like, I was ready to, it's like these just new experiences going on, that it's almost like that mama bear kind of thing would come out. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I was ready to go for someone, and I'd have to be like, oh, I can't
Yeah.
just be out here
Right.
getting
Right.
in people's space. But it's like, it's really, because now nobody bothers me, right? Like now that
Mm-hmm.
I've had my
Right.
baby and she's
Yeah.
here, people let me be. But it's like, as steadily growing, it's like the
Mm-hmm.
whole world has something to say, or they feel like they're allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
Which has made me more cautious too. When I see someone, I've learned to just congratulate. I don't ask a lot of questions, or I try to be really mindful of how, you know, if someone has said, "Oh, congratulations, that was really nice,"
Mm-hmm.
so just really try to be mindful of my wording, or say, "Hey, I pray that so you have a healthy birth," or something giving,
Mm-hmm.
instead of judging or being like, let me tell you about this.
Mm-hmm. Right.
um,
Mm.
but I always trying to remember that it's not the intention, and trying to remember they're just talking.
Right, right. Which yeah, that's a hard one to do, I
Yeah.
think. That's a
Depending on how much sleep you got or didn't
right,
get, it's like
exactly.
there are many
Yeah.
levels to it. Yeah.
Wow. And it just makes me think also, it's just managing the stress as well, especially as you're pregnant, and that becomes so central of just maintaining your own well-being and keeping stress levels low. How did you navigate that? And especially being very cognizant of now, media, the Black maternal health crisis, like
Right.
that's you're hearing that in the headlines. And so I think, like you said, Esperanza is a year now. So you were probably hearing that a lot. Like, how did you, just you're aware of it, but not just like what you were saying when you're going out somewhere and someone wants to talk about your growing belly. How did you not internalize that?
I mean, sometimes I would, but I would have to, remember to pray, or remember, like, okay, like one of my favorite verses was like, fearfully and wonderfully made, because it is really amazing
Mm-hmm.
that our bodies can really grow another human. And if everything is well, like the interventions aren't even needed, like your body really can do what it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have to, maybe repeat some things. I would, try whether, making sure that I'm eating a certain way or even sometimes it's like, look, I need a little something. So I might, have that chocolate or, something to kind of balance some things out. And just trying to, whether journaling, just work through it or, even being able to vent to a friend. Or even at that time, with my first two, letting my partner know, look, I'm not trying to have you fix it. I just want to vent and say what I want to say, not because we're trying, I need a solution. I just want to, just vent for a little bit. Because I didn't know that it was a miracle that, my birthing experience was really more of a miracle. Because when I did start looking and studying and, I even got to sit at a round table about Black women's birthing and violence and just understanding how, how much, is out there. And then looking at whether you're a celebrity and those challenges. And I'm really thankful that that wasn't my journey, but understanding how common and just trying to be encouraging. Because even recently, trying to support like my sister through it and some of the things that she had to go through where I actually had to call or just try to encourage her or finding something different, because it's like these things are not okay and we don't have to take it like so that's where having that community support, whether it's through family, friends, or any group that you might be part of where others might be willing to step in. Because for her, I'm like, you know what, I can do the call. Or if she was looking for something, I would, send messages to different groups and ask, does anyone know of this? Ways to combat that kind of negative, because what it is, what is coming in the news. And then I think too, it's important, and the birth center was really good at letting us know, is that you may have your birth plan and everything that you want, but sometimes things do happen that is out of your control. And even in my own group, there are certain things that people were looking to have that just didn't happen or that, it didn't turn out in the way that they wanted. And I think sometimes, we don't talk about that, because even my sister was saying, how come you don't hear about the hard parts? But it's hard because, when you're pregnant, you are just trying to keep a very peaceful, you don't want to really hear those hard parts. But then there's also this other reality that I think people don't fully comprehend, that, birthing, carrying a child, what it does to the body as a whole and what it means. And so I do think there needs to be a balance in that we, like even just for women's therapy, physical therapy, like we don't talk about pelvic floor, like all this stuff that shifts and what it means, that it's, 9 months of that growth, what that means. I think there's a lot of places where we need to do better at that too.
You bring up really good points. Yeah. Could you speak to a little bit about that? What was the postpartum like? And, especially now, just like you said, pelvic floor therapy, that's become a trend. You see that all the time. Whereas I think maybe just a decade ago, that was not talked about as a standard approach to, throughout the birth process and postpartum. I guess that's a loaded question, but I guess the first one is the postpartum experience. But then how can we talk more about some of those challenges, and what were some of the challenges that you encountered that now, but during that time, completely unaware of, that it would have been helpful to just, have a little bit of prep for?
Right. Yeah. One of the biggest one was just like, the diastasis recti, which I guess is like the separation of the stomach muscles or something. I was given like a packet about it, but that I didn't really understand what that meant. And how, that can, how it, it impacts your back, like the bladder, all these things. So that was really different. I didn't know how that was going to shift so much. So, that was a challenge. And then with postpartum, I remember my midwife asking me about, depression. And it's interesting because I remember her telling me, and maybe this was with my second birth, where she said, because I think there's this idea that postpartum, if you're going to have the depression, it would happen right away. But sometimes it's not right away. And when I think back, I think, oh, wow, like I was going through it, but I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like, it wasn't I guess the way that it's always spoken about, even
Okay.
though it was never about harming my child. It was just the way, like, I kind of checked out. Like, I still
Mm-hmm.
did this stuff, but I wasn't fully engaged. And so it's like, oh, I didn't know I was dealing with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was like learning through that. And then with, Esperanza, it's a different, because being a single mother with her, where it's like, I don't have another adult to give me a break or to have balance. It's really been about, thankfully having the other moms who understand and know. And
Mm-hmm.
so, where people were making sure like I had food, or if, whatever
Oh,
I needed, or if the
wonderful.
kids need
Yeah.
to be picked up. Um, but I now, and then like whether with a chiropractor,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know about that as much until this third pregnancy. And understanding like there are things that you can do before
Mm-hmm.
now in regards to like the pelvic floor, or just, like there
Mm-hmm.
is more information, but before it was, I learned as I went. Um, so that's something that, as people are thinking about conceiving, that's something to think about.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
What was the chiropractic experience like as you're pregnant and you're getting adjusted? I mean, when you're pregnant, I would imagine they're not adjusting you, like on your belly. So what was it more the hips, like focusing on the hips in preparation for the birth process, or was it just everything? You're getting your neck, everything adjusted. Tell us more about that.
well, it really depended where the pain was, because, I'd
Okay.
go and they would ask me, okay, what's hurting? And obviously most of it was the pelvic. So I'm trying to think, I started early on. It wasn't like I
Mm-hmm.
was already. So I'm trying to remember if I ever was on my belly at that time yet or not. But it
Mm-hmm.
was really like, oh, I'm feeling it here, or, so they would shift different parts
Okay.
and stuff. But I just really love like just a caring environment, the
Mm-hmm.
gentleness of each doctor, and just, like they just let me go in there and take my time, and
Mm-hmm.
just, so I mean, the whole thing. But
Okay.
yeah, even and especially after they would shift and do some things, I definitely felt better. And then sometimes if
Okay.
it didn't feel better, I could come back. But
Okay.
it's having someone that's going to work with you, and you're both on the same page, and they trust you and you trust them, and you can express. It was like, just a relationship. It was a good
Hmm.
relationship. And then even after I had Esperanza, you can get the first free, because even for the baby, right, coming out, and
Oh, that's
she,
right. I've heard
yeah,
that. Oh, so what
yeah.
was that like with Esperanza as a baby getting adjusted?
It was, like, cause they saw me before, so it was like family, coming in
Okay.
and being like, okay, you can adjust her. And then,
Wow.
I, like, maybe it was day 2, day 3 where I went back, like after I gave birth, I needed to adjust because, I was hurting.
Okay.
Um, and,
Wow. Day 3 after
yeah,
delivering.
cause this is
Wow.
different, cause I mean, I guess I'm older maybe, so it was, I'm not that old, but my body was just different. Like,
Yeah.
definitely not where I was, I just turned 30 with Zaila when I had her compared to
Mm.
turning 40. And I'm
Mm.
definitely not the same physical shape that I was either. Like, my
Hmm.
life is definitely not the same.
Mm.
Um, but it was that, they let me nurse. They never rushed me
Oh,
out. I
okay.
could sit there, or if she would cry, like they would let me, hold her. So they were
Okay.
really willing to work with me, which is, relaxing, instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm here
Right.
to this
Right.
beautiful thing. Um,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
that's important, to go to places where,
Hmm.
they allow you to have a real, like, lived experience with your child. Like, babies are gonna do baby things.
Right.
Um,
Right.
they're like, oh, okay, we're gonna have this person go ahead of you if that's okay. You can nurse, or you can do what you need to, or the diaper she decided to, go right then it's like, oh,
Okay.
now you can.
Yeah.
Um, so it was really positive. I actually really miss them because they became part of my everyday.
Right. Right.
Um, it's just a good place. Like, and seeing other moms in there from different stages,
Mm-hmm.
who just recently, or they look like they may be able to do soon. It was fun to meet other people, and then
Mm.
kids, you see all kinds of
Mm. Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Just the importance of communities, what you're saying, and being in a space, your whole uh, healthcare team, like you had an amazing, it sounds like chiropractic uh,
Yes.
doctors and the birth center and just your social support. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's really that's really powerful because I think a lot of people don't have that. And that's the challenge, our society's so fragmented. And so that social support, that network sometimes can be challenging. So you're really amplifying that as being so key as part of your wellness journey and what helps you with managing stress.
Yes. Well, and then I think, living in DC or the DMV where, I'm able to find in that medical, or, where, that I had a black midwife, I had, chiropractor was black. It's a black women everywhere, really, which,
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to push back against, what we see in the news and this broken system, then I would say definitely that was key.
Right.
Not to say that the other midwives that, weren't black, I mean, they were great too, but it was just knowing that, I had a reflection of myself, and maybe I didn't always have to express it, or I knew that I was in good hands, whether the chiropractor, and the thing too is that, you know, like the birth center was the ones, they told me about the chiropractor. So, there's a network too,
Okay.
right? They're going to say, hey, go to this person or go to this person. Um, and then, I would go, and if it was a positive experience, then I'm going to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully it was. And, so, but for people that maybe don't live in a city like DC,
Mm-hmm.
for me, online is another way that I would find support.
Okay.
I know some people, right, are more rural areas, or it's not, maybe as many people that look like them.
Right.
So it's like, what are other ways to find the support?
Right.
And then
Right.
like-minded people, maybe they're not going to look like you, but if they have the same way of thinking, then that's really helpful too.
Mm-hmm.
Because we really had, like, even just most recently when I went to take my children to the dentist, there's another woman there, and she was nursing her daughter, and she asked me, she said, how long did I nurse both of my children? And, my daughter, she was almost 3, my son was almost 2. And she said, people kind of pushed back at that with her,
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, yeah, I've had that too, where people look at me like, you're still nursing. But I'm like, it's only here that it's an issue.
Right. Right.
I think of things in a global sense too, right? Like, where the rest of the world does it very different. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, do what works for you. People
Mm-hmm.
are always going to have something to say, and
Yeah.
you're doing what's best for your family and for your child. And, people are always going to talk.
Right.
Um,
That's so good.
It's a challenge that way.
Right. That's wonderful. Do what works for you. Do what's best for you.
Yes. That's like my number one advice I tell any new, whether they're, any new birthing women or family.
Mm-hmm.
I that's something that I learned, that there's going to be a lot of information. It's going to be overwhelming. But at the end of the day, when it's the wee hours of the morning and it's you and your partner, your family, it's just, like, what's going to work best for you. So sometimes all the things that are written, or, it might not work for your family. You have to do what works for you, because you're the one that's up at the wee hours, or, and that's what I've learned. And another thing that one of the moms told me is that things go in seasons too. But sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm in this newborn stage forever, but it's really about seasons. And so trying to look, that really helped me understand that, maybe in some of the harder times, or the more challenging times, or when there's a sleep pattern and now the baby's growing, so now they're, not sleeping, that they're not going to stay in these stages forever. So just kind of, everything, there's a time and a season, and that's okay too. And I was doing some therapy too, like counseling, and something that my therapist said, it's okay that if all I got on the table that week was just peanut butter jelly sandwiches, like,
right. Yes.
it's okay. Like, you're not the worst mom because here you're pregnant and you got kids going to school and you're exhausted.
Yeah.
It's okay. Like, I think, we everybody adjusts, and
right.
understanding that my body is growing a whole little human and it needs to rest and it's exhausted. And this is all I can do for today, and that's enough, and that's okay. Like,
right.
Kids adjust too. So it's just learning how to, I guess, take it, day by day, and being present and being okay with what you can do. And I still have to do that today, because sometimes I still struggle with feeling like, oh, I didn't do all of this stuff. I was supposed to get all this stuff put away, and I just lay down here and just rested.
Right. Yes. Oh, I love that. The importance of therapy and just.
Oh, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, my therapist, it was funny because she said, there's 4 of you. It took me a second. I was like, 4. And then it was like, oh, I'm included.
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to take care of 4 people. And I was like, wait, I have a baby coming that makes. But I was like, oh, yeah, me. That's right. So I started learning how to say that. I'm like, there's 4 of us. And I was really thankful for that, because so I think just as women, whereas, we just take care, and we're trying to take care of everybody. And sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves.
Right.
You're going to be pregnant. That's really important, to take care of self, which then it is asking for help and telling people. Because sometimes too, like, making a list of things like, hey, if you want to come over and wash the dishes, because sometimes people do want to help, but they don't know what. Right. So I've had to sit and be like, oh, can you pick up the kids? Or I don't feel like cooking, food being brought, like thinking about those things too, that are where it allows people to help. Right. Instead of like, because I wasn't always sure what I needed, or didn't really know how to ask. That's something to think about too in that process.
That's wonderful. Yeah. That's wonderful. Roselane, this has been great. I really appreciate you just sharing your experience with us and our listeners, and just hearing how, your community and your faith, and really being grounded, and the importance of therapy and listening to yourself. I mean, you gave us so much, and I appreciate that. What is one thing that, as we're closing, anything else you want to share with our listeners that you haven't already shared?
Let me see. Let me see if I did. No, I think I said, just, at the end of the day, as one of the moms used to tell me, to be gentle with myself and give myself grace. Yeah. So that's what I would say is the last, be gentle with yourself, give yourself grace, and, trust yourself, and, find your people.
Yes. Yeah. Be
Find your
gentle with yourself. Give yourself grace. I love that. Yes. I'm going to be repeating that. I think that's applicable for all of us.
Yes.
But more especially during the process of birth, and especially a natural approach. That's wonderful. Thank you, Roselane. This has really been great. And for all of our listeners, we will connect Roselane's information for those who may have questions and want to engage with her further to find out more. She gave us a lot of resources. We'll link that below. And we appreciate you all listening to this episode of the Black Women's Wellness Podcast. Follow us across social media. Our handle is the BWWA Inc. You can also connect with us on our website, BWWA.com. Remember to subscribe, follow, and like us for our bi-weekly podcast episodes. We love engaging with our community. So if you have feedback, if you have comments, let us know what resonated for you this episode with Roselane. And we are excited and look forward to seeing you for our next episode. Remember, until next time, stay well and remember that our wellness is infinite. Take care, everyone.